Hello, hello! I have a very special thing to talk about today, something dear to my heart which has been many months in the making. With Heihachi having been released for a while now, and with Tekken World Tour Finals only a few days away, we're coming up on the end of Tekken 8's first season. Earlier in the year, the Tekken team made it clear that we weren't going to get major balance changes for quite a while. The meta since then has had some minor shakeups between patches, but generally speaking, what we got when version 1.05 dropped, all the way back in June, is the game we've been playing up until now. It's been quite a while since then, so I've had a lot of time to play this version of Asuka and digest the developer's vision for this version of the character. There might be some minor changes coming up when the last DLC character comes out, but there's definitely not going to be any major balance updates until Season 2 rolls around next year. With that said, I think it's been long enough that I can try to evaluate Asuka's balance in Tekken 8, and what sorts of balance changes would be useful for her going forward. A lot of people think Asuka is cheeks in this game, and want her to get a whole laundry list of buffs and additions to her kit, but I for one still think she has a lot of potential, and that she just needs a few good nudges in the right direction to help make her more consistent during high-level play. By the way, I recorded a lot of this video about a month and a half ago with far worse mic and voiceover quality, so get ready for that in 3, 2, 1. This video is going to be a two-parter. I want to start by getting into some of my rationale around this character and have a long talk about some of my thoughts when it comes to a couple of overarching balance change requests that are common among Asuka players. Once I get through all of that, I'll dive into a bunch of my own ideas for how I think we could improve this character's game plan and consistency. I built a lot on the design principles that I'm going to cover over that first half, so I really don't recommend skipping any of it, especially if you agree with one or both of the bullet points I'm about to show you in just a moment here. For the record, you may have noticed that I'm using B-roll for this video. A lot of what I'm about to talk about is going to be more of a listening experience than my normal content, at least until I get to my specific balance change requests. In any case, I'll still have some in-game demonstration for visual aid here and there, so whenever that happens, I'll notify you with this sound. With all of that being said, let's talk balance. So where is Asuka at, balance-wise? Asuka is in an amazing place in this game. For as long as I've been playing Tekken, she's never been this competitive. The developers have done an amazing job of adapting this character to the new aggression-oriented design direction of Tekken 8, without significantly changing Asuka's defensive identity or the clunky offense that sets her apart from most of the roster. All Asuka needs is just some nudges to help a skilled Asuka player improve their consistency against high-level patient players. For my part, I don't think that Asuka needs to be fundamentally changed or given any new moves, and rather, some reasonable expansions on the utility of her existing moveset will make it easier for her to apply her tricky and convoluted offense. My goal with my balance change suggestions is to improve on the areas that make Asuka unique, being her spacing, full crouch game, and defensive tools, in a way that'll make it more accessible to set up damage opportunities with counter hits and movement, as opposed to relying solely on slow mix-ups and power plays. By the way, if you're hearing any extra commentary in the background of my voiceover, that is Simba. I've got an African Grey. He's not being too loud and obnoxious for now, so I'll just leave him be. Before I get into all that though, let's talk about the bullet points I mentioned just a moment ago. When it comes to common complaints about the character, Asuka players have a lot of minor grievances, but in my opinion, there are two big things that stand out when discussing her balance in Tekken 8. 1. Give Asuka a new low. And 2. Improve Asuka's backdash. I have a lot to say about both of these points, and I have very strong opinions in particular about giving Asuka a new low. Something that I think is worth laying out from the get-go is what the purpose of a balance patch should really be. A lot of players think of a balance patch as an opportunity to get new toys to play with and an opportunity to make their character stronger. This is what balance patches were like in Tekken 7 in a lot of ways. If you played Tekken 7, you may remember how addicted to buffs the developers and player base both were, with the exception of exceptionally strong characters like Akuma, Geese, and Leroy. This sort of thing leads to a really unproductive patch culture, where no one is ever really happy with their character. Players will rather complain about wanting buffs rather than take the time to explore the character they already have. And in the case of Tekken 7, the game over time became a busted up bloated mess of overpowered characters with too many moves in my opinion. The actual purpose of a balance patch is to balance the game, not to make your character stronger. I think we can all find common ground in the opinion that it would be more worthwhile to nerf the characters that are dominating the game with their overtuned movesets and the lack of counterplay. It's easy to come up with undercooked ideas that will make it easier for your character to win. I think it would be a lot easier for Asuka to win if her forward 2 was an unblockable that instantly jibbed opponents on hit. But obviously, that wouldn't be very balanced and it wouldn't be very interesting from a design perspective either. When we're balancing a game, the goal should be to fine-tune a character's moveset and game plan in order to balance its output with its ease of use, and take into consideration that characters are supposed to have strengths and weaknesses. If a character is easy to play in some ways, they should be harder to play in others. Otherwise, there's hardly any justification for having a roster of characters to begin with. Naturally, some characters are going to be slightly less competitive than others, because the overall design of a game will always tend to favor one way of playing over another. The nature of how Tekken is played tends to favor characters that can control their opponent with fast pokes and plus frames, because you can limit their options while minimizing risk on your part. That's just sort of how it is in a game that's all about risk management. That's okay though. Maybe this is a hot take, but I'm not playing Tekken to win. I'm playing Tekken to learn and to have fun. As long as I can take Asuka to a tournament, and feel like I have everything I need to win as long as I try my hardest, I think that's what's important. In this way, I think the Tekken developers have actually done an unprecedented, astounding job with the balance of the Tekken 8 roster. A long time ago, during a discussion on balance, Harada made the point that if the only playable character was Kazuya Mishima, then the game would theoretically be balanced. This was meant to highlight that it's important and far more interesting to have different characters with different moves, but that having multiple characters with completely different gameplay styles will always make balancing a challenge. Ironically though, I think that Tekken 8 is the closest we've ever come to a balanced fighting game, where every character plays the same at a very basic level but still has just enough unique tools and tweaks to their fundamentals that each character still feels distinct and fun to play in their own way. I'm getting a bit off track, but I think this is all really valuable food for thought. If we're going to be telling the developers to make balance changes that will affect the competitive robustness of the entire game for years to come, I think it's important to have a damn good idea of what we're getting into and what exactly it is we're asking for. Now that I've got all of that out of my system, let's finally talk about lows and backdashes, how they factor into Asuka's balance, and if I really think it's a good idea to give Asuka a new low or to improve her backdash. Should we give Asuka a new low? To make myself clear right off the bat, my opinion is absolutely not. Asuka players have been complaining about Asuka's weakness on offense since time immemorial, and I used to be among them. A massive portion of Asuka's struggles on offense and the way that she's played in spite of it are due to the lack of a streamlined aggressive low from standing. Think something like Brian's hatchet kick, or something really snappy like Jun's down 4. Asuka doesn't have that, and it has a surprisingly profound impact on the way she's played at a high level. That's the way I like it though. Since my Tekken 7 days, I've come to really appreciate the things that make Asuka unique, and how much of a blessing it is to experience a character that has actual strengths and actual weaknesses. Not having these sorts of low attacks is a big part of what defines the character. It drives Asuka's skill expression, and this skill expression is what makes her so rewarding to play. I find it mildly infuriating how many prominent Asuka players are still on the bandwagon, saying Asuka needs a new low, without considering the impacts that it would have on her design. To me, it's like saying Kazuya needs a 15-frame hopkick. It'd make it a lot easier for him to win, but it's a ridiculous idea that flies in the face of the reasons why people enjoy that character to begin with. I'm getting ahead of myself though. I've actually considered making a video solely about this issue. It's really important to me to try to get other Asuka players out of the patch culture mindset, and to encourage them to think more deeply about how the character plays, and in terms of game balance, what would actually enhance her gameplay, not just make her easier to win with. I might actually still make that video, but for now I'll break it all down here. To help you understand how a new low would affect Asuka's game plan, I'm going to describe in depth why exactly Asuka struggles on offense. To start with, let's get one thing straight. Asuka Kazama is a defensive counterplay character. She has a privileged move list that's unusually safe, the best with Punisher in the game, a robust collection of counter-hit tools, a complete set of high-reward parries, a wide variety of high and low crushing attacks, a wide variety of powerful keep-out tools, a safe-on-block power crush, an above-average sidestep, and to top it all off, a pretty good 50-50 just in case she needs it. By design, to balance out her above-average defense, Asuka is meant to have a below-average offense. Ever since her inception in Tekken 5... Hey, Editor Alcratz here. After doing a lot of my script writing and recording, I learned that in Tekken 5 and Tekken 5 DR, Asuka's standing 3 at the time was actually a standalone version of her 1-3 low. It was 16 frames fast, dealt 12 damage, and was +1 on hit. I don't know much about how useful it was though, so I'm lying to you a bit when I say Asuka has never had a low like this, because she did, at least until Tekken 6 as far as I know. I just took for granted that Asuka has been this way forever. Whoops. I'm not going to redo a bunch of my writing and recording, so I guess just pretend that when I'm talking about Asuka's quote-unquote inception, I'm talking about Tekken 6 onward. By the way, look at this fucking backdash, man. Times have changed, huh? The developers have accomplished this in a really clever way, just by depriving her of two small but crucial tools, a plus-on-block jab and an aggressive standing low, thereby depriving her of a simple and low-risk traditional offense. I'll explain what that means. A +1 on block jab frame traps into itself, making it a super reliable and crucial tool for most characters to lock the other player down and make it hard for them to use any attacks they want. A low attack from a standing position that's fast, does decent damage, has decent tracking, and has low pushback on hit, can be easily used alongside a character's generic down forward 1 or some other safe mid, to apply a small mix-up that's slower than a jab, but still limits the other player's attack options. Against a player that's defending, this sort of poking mix-up will allow you to deal bits and pieces of damage to a player over time, without taking many risks on your part. Eventually, enough of these small pokes will frustrate the other player, and compel them to crouch into a mid, sidestep to avoid your attacks, or attack into your plus frames. As the other player doing the poking, you can take advantage of any of these behaviors by blowing them up with a powerful mid, using an attack that tracks sidesteps, or leveraging your frame advantage to stuff the other player's attacks with a counter hit. Basically, the plus on block jab and standing low poke combined create a rock-solid framework for dealing damage to the other player to manipulate them into making mistakes, which you can take advantage of for big damage, all without needing to overextend with slow rushdown attacks or unsafe power mix-ups. That's the kicker for Asuka. Despite being built for defensive counterplay, the lack of these tools means that Asuka can't easily manipulate a patient player into making mistakes like other characters can. Asuka thrives when the other player is making mistakes for free, but at a high level of play, she struggles to get those defensive counterplay tools to stick against patient players that don't make many mistakes. Instead, Asuka tends to rely on slow and risky plays to deal damage, using her amazing jab strings in place of a plus on block jab to get the other player to respect her, and then using that respect to force power plays with slow, plus on block rushdown moves and 50-50 power mix-ups. Otherwise, to accomplish the same sort of compact offensive ability that I was describing just a moment ago, Asuka has to stretch her moveset quite a bit and use somewhat unconventional tools in clever ways if she actually wants a smart player to slip up and make a big mistake. I won't get too far into the weeds of the Asuka offense theory, but basically it requires a lot more work than usual, using a lot of cancels, a lot of sidesteps, scraping together every low and throw she has, and making every single plus frame count. Now I'm going to try to convince you that all of this is a good thing for the character, and why you shouldn't be discouraged by this gap in Asuka's toolkit. Just on a surface level, it makes sense from a game design perspective that a defensively oriented character would naturally be weaker on offense. While it's true that there are characters in Tekken 8 right now with no significant weaknesses in their design, I don't think this justifies getting rid of Asuka's defining characteristics, and I also don't think doing so would be necessary for Asuka to be competitive anyways. Aside from that, I would wager that a lot of Asuka players will agree that having a jab that's minus on block is a defining characteristic of Asuka that significantly affects the way that she's played. Without being able to lock the other player down with frames, Asuka relies on her jab strings instead, using string extensions to control the opponent instead of frame traps. True plus frames for Asuka are always hard-earned by landing hits and opening the other player up to slower attacks and power plays. Making Asuka's jab +1 on block would be a major upset in her character design and invalidate a lot of her cool string-based gameplay, as well as diminish the importance of her power plays. I bitched about this earlier, but I think a lot of players are too quick to wish for buffs that'll make it easier for them to win with their character. A plus on block jab would definitely make it easier for Asuka to win, but you can see how a lot of her unique identity would be lost in the process, and how it would make her much less interesting to play. This is where I'm coming from. By comparison, the effect that the lack of an aggressive standing low has on Asuka's gameplay is more subtle. I can sort of understand why players don't tend to consider what it would actually mean for the character if we patched up this weakness and gave her a new low. For instance, I think a commonly agreed on suggestion is to make Asuka's 1-3 extension its own move, by making it her down 3 input or something. It seems small and unassuming. The thing is, even more so than lacking a plus on block jab, I believe that not having a standing low like this is a key limitation that affects every facet of Asuka's offense, for reasons that I hope I've explained well enough by now. A large spread of her entire move list, and arguably the entire way that Asuka is played at a high level, is completely based around the lack of a streamlined offensive low. Like her minus on block jab, not having a streamlined offensive low means that Asuka relies on a wide variety of alternate tools and strategies, and giving her a new low that fills that role would invalidate this aspect of the character. For example, this gap in her toolkit incentivizes Asuka players to use her full crouch game to access full crouch down forward 2, which is the aggressive tracking low you're looking for, as well as think outside of the box with her other lows like down back 3 and even down 4. These moves can be useful in ways that aren't obvious from the get-go. For example, a lot of Asuka players look at the pushback of down back 3 on hit and assume it resets neutral, but the move is still +4 on hit and you can still frame trap with that. The fact that Asuka's down forward 2 recovers really fast is a godsend in this scenario. It's totally possible to use down back 3 aggressively, you just need to know what you're doing. While running 1+2 isn't technically a low, but it serves the same purpose as well as being aggressive and plus on block, and dealing intense chip damage during gusto or heat. I could name 100 different moves and describe all of their implications, but I'll save that for my Asuka theory videos. I hope you get the idea. Asuka ultimately has moves with all of the properties of a good aggressive low. You just have to pick the right tool for the job and have a plan for how you're going to take advantage of it. You've also got to be aware of the weaknesses of these moves. You have to be crouching for full crouch down forward 2, down back 3 is weak to sidestep right, down 4 is minus on hit, and while running 1+2 is slow and launch punishable, and so on. All of these are compromises that you make to apply offense with this defensive character, but they're hurdles you can overcome by being a smart and skilled player. Beyond all of that, in place of a fast standing low, Asuka players are also incentivized to use throws and canned mix-ups, heavily emphasize movement with sidesteps and backdash in order to create counterplay opportunities, and use cancels to set up full crouch and stay up close, and use her various defensive tools to make it hard for the other player to take their turn when you're minus. You've got so many options with this character, and this whole universe of variety and creativity only exists thanks to that one simple limitation. All of these different tools and considerations are what I believe make Asuka so intensely rewarding at high levels of play. She's fun and interesting to play specifically because her offense isn't straightforward, and because it demands a lot of knowledge, variety, skill expression, and out-of-the-box thinking. Giving Asuka a new low like Jun's down 4 or down back 3 would circumvent all of this, and completely invalidate this aspect of the character. I might sound a bit hyperbolic, but I do genuinely feel like this would destroy a lot of what makes Asuka such an interesting and expressive character. At the start of this section, I brought up Kazuya as an example, and it bears repeating, I think. To me, asking for Asuka to have a new low is like asking for Kazuya to have a traditional 15-frame hop kick. It would definitely make it easier for him to win, but Kazuya players understand that the necessity of Electric Wind God Fist is a limitation that defines Kazuya's skill expression, and that rewarding skill expression is part of why they play him to begin with. The same can be extended to the idea of making Asuka's jab plus on block, which I also brought up earlier. I've never seen an Asuka player unironically make this suggestion, because it's obviously an intentional design choice that fundamentally shapes Asuka's gameplay. I really think more Asuka players should embrace this limitation that Asuka has, and explore a little deeper into her move list. She has all of the tools you need, you just need to be clever with how you use them. Really dig deep into this character and think about how you can exploit every little property her moves have. This character is so much stronger than people think, and it really just takes some proper creativity, theory crafting, and practice. I found mountains of joy in exploring all of the ways that this character can be used, and how you can twist her move list to work around her fundamental weaknesses. It's made me a much better and much more motivated player too. If you still disagree and you're convinced that Asuka needs a new low, I would honestly suggest playing a different character. I don't mean to say that my opinion is the correct one, but I consider myself very optimistic about the character that we have in our hands right now, and I'm really wary of making changes and giving her tools that she doesn't need. If you're looking for the developers to make such a foundational change by giving her a utility she's never had before, then low-key, maybe Asuka isn't the character for you. And I'm serious, I'm not trying to be negative. Genuinely, there are plenty of characters in this game that have what you're looking for. Try Jung instead. Jun shares a lot of Asuka's utilities, but she has a plus on block jab, as well as a couple of really good standing lows for offense and some offensive stances to boot. I'm honestly at a bit of a loss as to why Asukas who complain about lows aren't playing Jung instead. If the reason is that Jung is boring to play compared to Asuka, I might wager that's because Jun's offense is a lot more streamlined than Asuka's, so there's some food for thought. I've been told that Azucena is another good character to try out if you're an Asuka player that's looking for different buttons. She has those streamlined offensive tools on top of also having a robust, unconventional reads-based defense. I get the impression that Azucena is probably a lot more interesting than people give her credit for. So that's my whole opinion on giving Asuka a new low. I think it's a terrible idea, I think there's a good chance it would ruin the character, and I'm praying every day that the developers continue to stick to their guns and don't give in to undercooked balance ideas. I want Asuka to remain an interesting character, and I don't want to invalidate the things that make her unique. I think it's a way better idea to improve Asuka's offensive ability instead by expanding on the unique tools and ideas she already uses, rather than fundamentally flipping the design of the character on its head by making her play like every other character in the game. Anyways, this part of the script is way longer than I anticipated, but hopefully I've been able to change some minds. The point about the backdash won't be nearly as long, I promise. Should we improve Asuka's backdash? This is the other biggest change I see Asuka's ask for. Asuka is traditionally a defensive character that used to put a lot of emphasis on keep out and whiff punishment. In Tekken 8, Asuka's backdash is so bottom tier that it's basically impossible to create more than small amounts of space on demand, without the cooperation of the other player backdashing as well, or relying on attacks that have a lot of pushback when they connect. It also doesn't help that backdash cancels are incredibly risky in Tekken 8 since you can be hit during your neutral inputs. And Asuka playing a passive defense up close is usually limited to a single, tiny backdash block at a time, meaning she can hardly ever outspace anything. With all that said, when it comes to Asuka's backdash, I'm honestly a bit more on the fence. I'm generally pretty confident in the vision that the developers have for this character, and I'm wary about making changes that would disrupt the dynamic they're going for. I believe the developers want to emphasize Asuka's close-range defensive options and disincentivize passive gameplay and long-range spacing. In Tekken 7, you pretty much play Asuka exclusively from range 3 and beyond because her biggest strengths have always been her keep-out and whiff punishment. That's what the Tekken team is trying to steer away from in Tekken 8, in favor of Asuka's more unique defensive quirks. In addition to Tekken 8 being more offensively tuned in general, the developers want to drive Asuka players more towards frequently applying her reversal, sabakis, high and low crushing moves, power crush, and sidestep too. They've done this by incentivizing a more up-close brawler playstyle with Asuka, by fleshing her out with tools for dealing chip damage, and expanding her ability to get plus frames on block. While running 1+2 is the star of the show that does a lot of heavy lifting for Asuka, while still being in line with her convoluted offense since it's a bit slow and risky. Other changes like the new Destabilizer, forward 1 being +5 on block, down back 1 being 14 frames, access to homing throws, and the general emphasis on 50-50s in Tekken 8 in favor of counter hits all help to incentivize playing Asuka up close to get the most out of her moveset. They've also encouraged Asuka to play up close, of course, by kneecapping the effectiveness of her backdash. Even if you wanted to run away and play spacing and keep out, you actually straight up can't in a lot of cases. Even so, I think they've generally managed to reduce the effectiveness of Asuka's spacing, while still preserving her ability to set up whiffs, using moves like down back 3 and forward 4, which have lots of pushback on hit or block, or by leveraging her above average sidestep. It's also worth pointing out that Asuka's keep out is still really strong, and when she has a lot of space between her and the other player, the weakness of her backdash fades away a little bit because backdash cancel becomes way less risky. So when she has space, she's able to keep it pretty easily by keeping the other player at bay using her keep out and using backdash cancels and fuzzy sidesteps to create whiff punish opportunities just like she used to. So do I think they should buff her backdash? I could go either way, but I think I'm leaning towards no, and I'll explain why. On the one hand, giving Asuka the ability to create more space with a single backdash will unequivocally benefit her defensive counterplay by making her whiff punish setups more reliable and giving her the option to properly outspace the opponent's options. On the other hand, I understand the desire to emphasize Asuka's cool, unique defensive tools, and how improving her backdash would de-emphasize that unique defensive play. I think it would be just as effective to not buff Asuka's backdash directly, but modify the pushback of her moves instead and try to make her unique defensive toolkit a bit more well-rounded and easier to implement. So, to completely summarize, I lean more towards the latter. I'm not totally sure that buffing Asuka's backdash will have a significant negative effect on her potential variety and skill expression, but I think it would be a bit of a gamble, and I also think there are more interesting ways that the character can be improved that's more in line with the design direction that the developers are clearly invested in. Now that I've got all of that off my chest, I'm proud to present a list of Alkratz's balance change ideas for Asuka in Tekken 8. I've been poring over Asuka's move list and objectives, crunching numbers and theory crafting for months now, so I think I have a pretty good idea of how to make this character better to play. My goal with these ideas was to come up with reasonable changes that will improve Asuka's consistency at a high level while being in line with the developer vision for the character, and not significantly changing her strategy as it exists right now. The effect that I want these changes to have is to make it more viable for Asuka to play around whiff punishment and counter hits. A big reason for Asuka's inconsistency is her over-reliance on forcing power plays with large frame gaps, and I think these changes will make alternate strategies more accessible. The rest of this video from here on out is going to be demonstrated in-game, so if you were sleeping up until now and you want to see what I'm talking about, go ahead and watch the screen for the next 30 minutes or however long this takes me. I've got 4 big suggestions that should make a big difference for Asuka's gameplay, and a handful of extra ones to patch up some unrelated gripes and inconsistencies with the character. So let's get into it. My first suggestion is to make full crouch down forward 2 +2 on hit. Right now it's 0 on hit, so both players recover at the same time. An Asuka player wants to use full crouch down forward 2 because it's her best low in terms of speed, tracking, and offensive ability. It basically allows her to play small Tekken when she normally can't, at the cost of requiring you to get into full crouch first. Full crouch down forward 2 is 16 frames, but even though that's decently fast, there's still a lot of time for the other player to interrupt between attacks when you're trying to use this as a poking tool. While standing 4 as a mix-up works to keep the other player honest, since it's 11 frames, but it can still be interrupted by jabs, and this mind game isn't always enough for Asuka's full crouch game to be worth the trouble for poking purposes. Making this move +2 on hits will mean that while standing 4 is a frame trap. It'll also mean that consecutive full crouch down forward 2s, right after another, can't be interrupted by a standing 15 frame launcher, so the other player's options for counterplay will be slightly more limited, making full crouch game a little bit safer. If you want to go even further, this will expand Asuka's viable full crouch options. While standing 2 will take the place of while standing 4 as a slightly out-of-frame mid-interrupt tool, which will also make its string extensions useful for mix-ups. While standing 1 will also be a stronger mid-option thanks to the frame advantage. Crouch cancel techniques during pressure will be more reliable too, such as mixing up full crouch down forward 2 with a crouch cancel back to 1+2 cancel, or doing crouch cancel into 1-2-4 for more rewarding small Tekken counterplay. Just these 2 frames will make a big difference in turning Asuka's full crouch game into a convoluted but reliable strategy for poking players out and frustrating them into pressing a button. Next, I think it would be really good to increase the minimum pushback of down 2 on block. Right now, if you use down 2 from point blank to about half of its tip range, Asuka won't be able to evade a generic while standing 4 by backdashing. I think we should be able to evade a while standing 4 with a backdash after connecting down 2 from any range. This will bring down 2 into parity with down back 3, which already allows you to backdash a while standing 4 from just about any range. This will make it easier to apply Asuka's spacing game to set up for whiff punishes, since you'll always be able to rely on having the correct spacing to do so, whether you use down 2 or down back 3. This will also make down 2 a more effective mid mix-up alongside down back 3, and make it more valuable to use up close as an 18-frame mid mix-up in any scenario, since you always have the spacing to leverage on block for counterplay and continuation. Making down 2 more valuable will also mean its heat engage property and heat dash launch both see more action, which would be awesome because I think this move conceptually is really fun and interesting as a heat engager. Big request number 3 is a 2-parter, and the first is to increase the evasiveness of back 1. This move has a lot of potential as an evasive tool with an interesting whiff punishment and counter hit utility, along with the cancel to let you avoid getting low parried and enter full crouch with some mental advantage instead. The speed, hurtbox, and lack of mobility hold back 1 back from actually low profiling anything, like its animation would suggest. I think this move should evade attacks like a backswing blow. Back 1 ought to have enough backwards movement during its startup or a low enough hurtbox that Asuka can slip around down forward 1s and other low commitment pokes. Ideally, it would keep its forward movement so that the cancel will still approach the other player a little bit. This improved evasiveness should mean that back 1 will be more effective as an unorthodox keep-out tool, since it'll actually be possible to evade attacks with it, which will give you some plus frames on hit as you transition into full crouch. It'll also counter hit if the other player is doing a string. This will also mean that back 1 becomes a viable tool in close range to cause the other player to whiff small checks against her offense. I think an evasive option like this that's effective for discouraging jabs and fast mid-checks will be very welcome among Asuka's close-range defensive tools, and it'll be balanced by its super slow 29-frame startup. The other change I'd love to see for back 1 is a just frame input to allow players to trigger its counter hit effect on normal hit. Back 1 on counter hit deals 42 damage and leads to a good knockdown, but actually landing it as a counter hit is very unlikely, unless you catch the other player in the middle of a string. It is, however, more likely to punish an attack that it's evaded. Allowing a skilled Asuka player to maximize their damage after a successful evasion will make back 1 a far more useful tool, and will incentivize Asukas to use it often as a defensive option. Since back 1 is easy to low parry on a reaction, guaranteeing the 42 damage knockdown on a just frame input is unlikely to make the move any stronger outside of counter hits and whiff punishment. My last major suggestion is to make Destabilizer +6 if the Asuka player doesn't commit to an extension. Currently, an empty Destabilizer leaves Asuka at -3, despite what the frame advantage says on the bottom of the screen. Destabilizer's canned mix-up is in a pretty good spot, but I think the move could be incentivized further and made more interesting if we brought back some of the move's classic utility, like in Tekken 7, Destabilizer was actually just a +8 unbreakable grab. Making an empty Destabilizer +6 will mean that back 4 is a frame trap, and 1+2 will trade with jabs. This will allow Asuka players to take advantage of the decent 19-frame startup of Destabilizer, and use it as a stepping stone to lead into stronger and slower power plays. If an Asuka player plans on going for a power play, the +6 frames and consistent spacing from empty Destabilizer will allow them to represent the threat of a frame trap, while also being handy for mitigating the risk of committing to a slower mix-up or power play. This is in comparison to what she would normally have to do, which is commit to a super risky power play after hoping the other player respects a string that's heavily minus on block. This would still be a perfectly viable option, but a damageless unbreakable throw with frame advantage, which to be clear requires some setup to connect on its own because it's linear and it doesn't have great reach, would be a really intriguing tool for clever Asuka players to use to tighten up her Unga Bunga Tekken. An empty Destabilizer as it is right now is easy for the other player to distinguish from the canned mix-up, due to the timing of it. So without changing the recovery of an empty Destabilizer, making it +6 will give the move an extra utility that doesn't affect how players respond to the canned mix. Those are the 4 major changes that I think will significantly advance Asuka's gameplay. I think that all of these changes are very reasonable, and I think they'll expand Asuka's utilities in ways that make a lot of sense for the character, and which will help Asuka players explore and exploit different ways of playing her. To wrap up the video, I've got a small laundry list of extra ideas that I'll rattle off before closing out, which have to do with patching up inconsistencies and making some other minor improvements. For forward 1, remove the knockdown property of this move when it hits at a clean back turn angle. This also applies to 1-1 and back 2-1. I believe this property was added when Asuka still had can-cans as an extension to forward 1, in order to prevent back 2-1-4 as a back turn launcher. However, when Tekken 8 launched, the can-can extension was removed, and instead now forward 1-4 just defaults to the snake edge. So this change to forward 1 is obsolete. This knockdown property needlessly complicates Asuka's back turn punishment. If we remove this knockdown property, then Asuka will be able to use back 2-1-4, crouch cancel forward 3+4 as a consistent 73 damage back turn punish. Forward 2. Forward 2 is a really good whiff punisher, and this normally extends to sidestep punishment, especially because the forward movement of forward 2 tends to help to realign the target for consistent on-axis juggle combos, which maximizes the damage from a sidestep punish. However, forward 2, when used as a sidestep punish, has a nasty habit of completely missing against opponents who are using an attack with a lot of forward movement. This is not only a tragic waste of a hard-earned whiff punish, but also an awkward situation for the Asuka player to recover from, because she's often recovering in back turn while the other player is already actionable. Fix this inconsistency by whatever means necessary, so that Asuka can use forward 2 reliably as a sidestep punish. For up forward 2, up 1+2 actually, whoops, Freudian slip. I think that this move should be capable of recovering in full crouch if the player holds down. Up 1+2 is an interesting idea, but fundamentally doesn't have much of a use in Asuka's moveset, even with Naniwa Gusto. She's really not hurting for painfully slow attacks that give her plus frames and a knockdown on hit. With Naniwa Gusto, allowing Asuka to recover from up 1+2 in crouch will give her a completely new ability to enter full crouch with plus frames on block. Currently, Asuka barely has any options to enter full crouch with plus frames on hit. I don't think this would be a major game changer because the Gusto version of up 1+2 has a lot of pushback on block, which is limiting for Asuka's full crouch game. Still, it's something that a clever Asuka player could definitely take advantage of, especially when used at the wall, where pushback isn't a factor. Recovering in crouch would also make an ordinary up 1+2 difficult for most characters to punish with a knockdown, so the move could have some conceivable utility as a medium risk knockdown mid, instead of being completely useless. For 2-1 down 1+2, I think we should get rid of the frame gap that allows players to jab interrupt the third hit of 2-1 down 1+2. The reason is that I want to boost the viability of the 2-1 down 1+2 back cancel. This cancel is really good for offense since Asuka sticks to the other player like glue. It's hard to implement though because the counterplay against 2-1 down 1+2 is too easy, and it diminishes the threat of the counter hit launch. Although I can use 2-1-2 instead, which is only -10 on block, I don't feel like this is enough to validate 2-1 down 1+2 back as a cancel for Asuka. The cancel itself is already very risky due to the immense minus frames, which are more than enough to launch Asuka before she can block. Not to mention, the third hit of 2-1 down 1+2 itself can be evaded with a sidestep left. I think it would be fair to make it a bit easier for Asuka to access the cancel by making 2-1 down 1+2 an airtight option for beating buttons. For Sidestep 4, I want to increase the backwards movement during its recovery to be more similar to back 3. Sidestep 4 is one of Asuka's least commonly used moves, due to a combination of its low reward, weak hitbox, and long time to execute between the sidestep animation and the 17 frame startup. It's useful for keep out and has some interesting active frames, but it's not that useful. Increasing the backwards movement of the recovery would give Sidestep 4 a more distinct purpose as a keep-out move alongside back 3, which maintains spacing in the same way. This will make Sidestep 4 more difficult to whiff punish, and allow Asuka to maintain a keep-out position better while using it. Asuka's would definitely start using this move more as a counter-hit keep-out tool, in spite of its other weaknesses. For full crouch down forward 3, I think we should increase the minimum pushback on block. This move can be used as a mix-up tool from full crouch, but I think it's a bit incongruent with Asuka's full crouch game because at a close range, you give up all of your agency if the move is blocked. It's -9 on block and can leave you at point blank. If the move had more pushback on block, Asuka could conceivably backdash to limit some of the other players' options. I think this is fair given the trouble of using a 17-frame linear move from crouch, which only deals around 38 damage if it hits. I don't use this move very much, but better pushback on block would make full crouch down forward 3 more appealing as a power mid option during Asuka's full crouch game. A cool bonus change would be to make full crouch down forward 3 on hit lead to a clean wall splat more consistently. Up forward 2 has a strange issue where it won't knock the opponent down if you use it to whiff punish after sidestepping an attack in specific situations. This isn't common, but it's annoying enough that I avoid using it as a whiff punisher after sidestepping. I can get this to happen consistently by doing a sidestep right against Asuka's jab here, and whiff punishing with up forward 2. Instead of getting knocked down, she stays standing. This has to just be a bug, so I'd love to see this get fixed so we can always count on at least getting the off-axis knockdown. It'd be even better if the full damage knockdown was always guaranteed though. For 3+4, I would like for this move to realign the other character on hit. It's possible to do a frame-tight dash 1+4 pickup after 3+4 for a full launch, but this is really inconsistent based on the axis that 3+4 hits at, or if it's low crushing an attack. If Asuka players could consistently pick up after 3+4 on hit, good Asuka players could express their skill by turning this move into a proper orbital heal launcher. For while standing 3, do something to fix an issue where launching with this move while your back is to the wall will cause forward 2-3 to side switch unless you delay it when you try to convert into a juggle. Maybe the solution would actually be to increase the vertical hitbox of forward 2, or something along those lines. You should be able to count on converting with forward 2-3 without a side switch. This is just a needless complication for Asuka's while standing punishment when her back is to the wall. And that's finally it. I really hope you thought some of my comments and ideas throughout this video were interesting and insightful. I wouldn't normally ask this, but if you agree with the design-related stuff I'm putting down, and you think that my balance change ideas will be good for this character, it would be awesome if you were to share this video around and try to show it to Harada and Murray on social media. If I could have any influence on anything in the gaming world right now, I would want it to be this. I love the shit out of this character, and I want to see the devs keep cooking and working towards making her the most interesting Asuka she can be. There have been doubts and concerns floating in my mind for a while now about some things that vocal players tend to say about this character, and I've been worried about what it could mean if the developers are listening to the wrong people for balance advice. There are good reasons why game developers warn about the dangers of balancing a game based on the feedback of a competitive player base. I've never been this invested in Tekken, and it means a lot to me that Asuka stays Asuka, and that we have the right mentality as a community. Anyways, fun fact, the first video I ever put out for Asuka in Tekken 8 was actually another video talking about balance. It was sort of like a response to a video by Fergus, and I was saying a lot of the same things at the time, but I've refined a lot of my ideas since then too. It's fascinating to see how my content creation ability has grown in such a short time span. I've gotten so much better at scripting and recording voiceover, and I think I'm a lot more articulate as a communicator and better as a player. In case you're interested, I'm cooking more Asuka Theory content, but it's slowing down a bit because I'm trying to spend more time playing the game to flesh out some of my ideas. I want to put out another video kinda like my Keep Out theory, to try to help Asuka players figure out how to play offense with this character. But as you might have learned from this video, Asuka's offense is a bit wacky, so it's taking a while to field test and solidify my ideas. I have other Asuka Theory videos cooking, but for now I'm trying to prioritize constructing a robust theory for Asuka's offense, so fingers crossed that nothing gets in the way of that. Remember to join the Asuka Discord and all that if you want to join and call me a jackass with a carried character or whatever. For now, I'll catch you later.